It's now we turn to India, and the title of the presentation has changed somewhat. It's now called the Strategic Outlook, India, Australia and the Indo-Pacific. And it's my great pleasure to introduce His Excellency Mr. Manpreet Vohra, who's the High Commissioner for India. And as you know, India is now the largest country in the world. Its population has now exceeded that of China. Secondly, its population is much younger, whereas the Chinese population is ageing, and possibly as a result of the one-child policy many years ago. India is now the largest population in the world. It's also the largest democracy in the world. And again, I welcome to the stage His Excellency, the High Commissioner for India, to speak to us today about the strategic outlook, India, Australia and the Indo-Pacific.
Well, thank you, General Irving. All of you, namaste and good day. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to RUSI New South Wales for inviting me to speak at the 4th edition of its prestigious International Defence and Security Dialogue. It is indeed an honour to address such an august audience alongside such eminent experts, though I must confess to feeling somewhat lonely as the sole representative today of my tribe, diplomats, who are actually supposed to be managing strategic tensions, the theme of our dialogue. Our discussion on the challenges in the Indo-Pacific and this particular session on perspectives of the Quad partners could not have come at a more opportune time. And I would like to think that with the focus no longer on the Leaders' Summit next week in this city, now sadly having to be postponed, we may have more attention paid to other important deliberations, such as through this dialogue. Let me share with you some thoughts on the topic India, Australia, and the Indo-Pacific. I chose the title because to me, and I hope you will agree, it suggests a certain relevance, perhaps even a convergence among its three parts. But two of them, India and Australia, are nation states, one a continent, the other a subcontinent, both ancient cultures, while the third, the Indo-Pacific, is a relatively new construct that some remain reluctant even to adopt into the lexicon, even as certain others are condemning and vilifying it already as some sort of new evil empire. So what is the Indo-Pacific? Is it merely a place or a space, an exercise in cartography stretching westward what was generally understood to be the boundaries of the well-known Asia-Pacific? Is it an acknowledgement of the untenability of the long-held notion, at least since 1945, and as long as American strategic dominance remained uncontested, that countries adjunct to the Indian and Pacific Oceans could be separately treated and strategized for? Is it a readjustment of foreign and defense policies, shifting focus from continental to maritime security? Or does the Indo-Pacific reflect a much deeper and lasting shift in the way major global powers now perceive this region and the intertwining of their economic imperatives, security interests, and strategic competition with it? In my humble view, it is all of the above. It is an acceptance of the fact that even if you were to still call it Asia-Pacific, it would be self-defeating to continue to restrict the definition only to the Pacific Rim countries and not include at least adjoining nations such as India, a very large democratic country and market economy that is now not only the fastest growing, but one with major stakes in the region that also brings to it the same set of values, liberties, and rule of law that much of the world wishes to guard, but which are increasingly under threat from other different systems with their alarming ambitions and monochromatic vision of how the world should be ordered and how people and societies should be governed. Meanwhile, the largely Atlantic-centered post-Second World War bipolar order is dead, while multilateralism has failed to preserve either lasting peace and security or sustained economic progress and unimpeded commerce. In other words, the so-called rules-based international order is under serious challenge. In recent years, nowhere is this more apparent than in the Indo-Pacific region, notwithstanding the ongoing major conflict and talk of a possible third world war taking place once again in good old Europe. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, the real strategic long-term great power contestation has shifted to this region, and it is no longer just in the realm of hard military might, but encompasses ideology, political, economic, technological, and soft power as well. Thankfully for many of us, the United States is repositioned back in the Indo-Pacific, but this time with the realization that it can no longer go it alone, and that the emergence of India, the increased external engagement of Japan and Australia, the wider interests of South Korea, the broader outlook of ASEAN, and the shifting sands in the Middle East are all transformations which, while they may not yet make for what we can call a new multipolar world, more stable and highly desirable as many of us would believe that it would be, more stable, and they do present pragmatic opportunities to stitch up trusting partnerships and synergize efforts with like-minded countries, each of whom carry with them valuable heft and considerable weight in various domains and can rightly be called at least middle powers or even emerging poles. Seen in this light too, the concept of the Indo-Pacific appears both apt and attractive. Maps and terms can be significant in and of themselves. Let me read to you this excerpt from the absorbing book, The Contest for the Indo-Pacific, by the brilliant Professor Rory Medcalf of the National Security College at ANU in Canberra. He says, and I quote, "At one level, the Indo-Pacific counts simply as an idea, describing and imagining a region that has become the global center of strategic and economic gravity, just as the North Atlantic was for much of the 19th and 20th centuries. But there is a practical point too. Words shape the world. An imagined space on a map both reflects and influences real and palpable things like military deployments, patterns of prosperity, and calculations of risk among the world's most powerful states." Unquote. While Australia, Japan, and India were the first to rename their region as the Indo-Pacific some years ago, the world was somewhat more benign at the time, and the initial focus was largely on the security of sea lanes linking the Pacific and Indian Oceans, and a dynamic coupling as seas of freedom and prosperity in broader Asia, as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe had described it. And Lauren just told us about the speech in which he said this. Later, its potential as a transformational economic corridor of trade, investments, and growth became evident to others, such as the United States. Around the same time, extraordinary and revanchist territorial claims, coupled with real physical aggression and economic coercion, attempts at political interference, bullying, and elite capture by a major power in the region, I suppose you can all guess which one, made it an unavoidable geopolitical discourse with a strategic salience, leading then to a counter-determination among like-minded partners to ensure what we call a free and open Indo-Pacific. since it is grounded in the actual reality of events, threats, and challenges facing the Indo-Pacific, the term and the concept acquired an almost irrepressible logic and has been picked up quickly by receptive audiences and governments in practically every significant country or region. There is, of course, one major capital that rejects it, but ironically, the vehemence of its attack in itself vouches for the relevance and importance of the Indo-Pacific as a counterweight, as an alternate model, and as a geopolitical rebalancing message in itself. There is perhaps no analyst or commentator today who doubts that security, stability, peace, and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific region is vital for the world at large. The Indo-Pacific is a significant expanse of geography, with 65% of the world's oceans and 25% of its land. It is home to over 64% of the world's population, including 58% of all youth, largely thanks to India. It accounts for 62% of the global GDP and 2/3 of global growth. Over 50% of world trade traverses this maritime domain. Whether it is trade and investment, connectivity and travel, or geopolitics and security, what begins in the Indo-Pacific oceans no longer ends there, be they shipping and sea lanes, supply chains and markets, or resources and competition. It is essential that the Indo-Pacific endures and flourishes to ensure future security and prosperity, not just of us in the region, but also of our friends and partners beyond it. That is why the region must be governed by commonly agreed international norms, rules, and practices, and that is why those who desire this end state must work together. India subscribes to this creed, as does Australia. The Indo-Pacific is of great salience to us. As an ancient maritime nation, India is all too familiar with the region that spans both these oceans. Our engagement with it spans centuries and includes civilizational, cultural, trade, and people-to-people linkages. In a more contemporary sense, the Indo-Pacific represents India's modern widening interests and its new partnerships. In our approach, the region stretches from the western coast of North America to the eastern shores of Africa, somewhat larger than Australia's current outlook. It is growing in importance and it is critical to India's future. 90% of India's trade travels on its waters. It is the most dynamic, innovative, and fastest growing part of the world. India's own rise has placed it well at the center, as has Australia's. For both of us, this shift in economic trajectory from the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific is important. We are both convinced that the destiny of the world will be deeply influenced by the course of developments in the Indo-Pacific region. India's Act East policy, therefore, is being pursued more vigorously and with greater conviction than ever before in our history. Australia's focus on Southeast Asia and its specific step-up policies mirror the same belief and intent. And for both of us, the unity and centrality of ASEAN is fundamental. India has taken the lead to establish a regional architecture in the region, of which the 23 nation and 10 dialogue partners Indian Ocean Rim Association and the 35 navies Indian Ocean Naval Symposium are notable examples contributing to deepening mutual understanding on maritime challenges and encouraging a collective approach. Our friend Australia is an important member of both. We are also delighted with Australia's announcement in Dhaka last week that it will host the important annual Indian Ocean Conference here, most probably in Perth, in 2024, next year. 4 years ago, India also started the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative with 7 important pillars of cooperation, which are maritime security, marine ecology and resources, capacity building, disaster risk reduction and management, science and technology and academic cooperation, trade, connectivity and maritime transport. We are pleased that Australia is chairing the marine ecology pillar. India has sought to strengthen security and freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific by becoming a net security provider. We have built close relations with countries across the region and particularly with Australia, with whom we are now a comprehensive strategic partner. The Indian Navy's Information Fusion Center for the Indian Ocean region, which is based just outside New Delhi and is also staffed with Australian officers, among others, has enhanced maritime domain awareness among partner countries. India also participates in anti-piracy operations in the Gulf of Aden. We have stepped up our military, navy and air force exercises in the region with more frequency and increasing complexity, perhaps none greater than with Australia in both bilateral and multilateral formats. Australian and Indian land forces regularly train together under exercise Austra Hind and share expertise in multi-domain operations such as occurred in the deserts of Rajasthan last year and will in Western Australia later this year. Our navies train together under exercise AUSINDEX. The Indian Navy and Air Force participates regularly in exercises Kakadu and Pitch Black. Australia is the next host for exercise Malabar in August. Last year, we operationalized our mutual logistics support agreement, and Indian maritime surveillance aircraft now land in and deploy from Darwin and Australian aircraft from Goa. Our Army, Navy and Air Force chiefs meet regularly and all 3 branches hold annual service talks. On the civilian side, in 2021, we started our 2+2 Foreign and Defence Ministers Dialogue, a format that India has with very few close partners only. In terms of assisting with hard capabilities, in February last year, India signed a contract to supply supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles, the BrahMos, arguably best in class in the world, to the Philippines. More are expected to follow with some other countries. India's dynamic defense manufacturing industry is now producing top-class, sophisticated, yet cost-effective platforms that could be useful to many friends and partners in the Indo-Pacific as they seek to beef up their deterrence and defense preparedness. India is also a committed, nimble and able first responder at times of disasters, cataclysmic events and health pandemics. Our HADR assistance has taken many forms across regions, most recently in Kiribati and Tonga, not far from here, with last mile delivery often aided by Australian assets. We have set up FIPIC, or the Forum for India-Pacific Islands Cooperation, to strengthen our outreach to the Pacific Island countries, all of whom are gathering on Monday in Port Moresby to meet Prime Minister Modi, who is hosting the 3rd FIPIC summit there. Australia itself is a major player in the South Pacific, and there are opportunities for us to do more together. Our development partnerships in the Indo-Pacific are diverse and encompass financial assistance, technical cooperation, capacity building and infrastructure projects, all of which meet the needs of our friends and are guided by their socio-economic priorities and their preferred development roadmaps. We deploy significant resources, but they are demand-driven and not dictated by us. We do not saddle receiving countries with white elephants or with sugar-coated loans that quickly morph into unsustainable debt and threatened sovereignty. This is a practical demonstration of our goodwill and our responsible conduct, unlike the all too familiar egregious practices of a major player in our region that has famously brought some countries to their knees and on the brink of economic collapse. Ladies and gentlemen, in recent times, we have seen several countries and associations, including in far-off Europe and North America, articulating their vision and strategies for the Indo-Pacific. India welcomes this trend, as does Australia, which is an indication not just of the growing significance of our region and the importance of maintaining peace, prosperity, stability, and a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific, but also of the threats to it. The recent revival and rapid maturing of the Quad, with us four like-minded partners getting together with a sense of real purpose to guard global commons and offer alternate and better options to our friends in the Indo-Pacific, is a telling manifestation of the shifting sands of geopolitics and geoeconomics and its new realities. These are major challenges, even existential for some on the front lines. It is also clear that they cannot be addressed with outdated systems or old beliefs, either in the global leadership of a few or in the effectiveness of the multilateral system as it exists, or as it has evolved, or as it has been allowed to degenerate. The lack of coordinated or cooperative global responses that we see more and more of have exposed these vulnerabilities and weaknesses of the multilateral order. Most recently, the COVID pandemic has laid bare the fault lines from excessive dependencies that have either been willfully engineered or unwittingly overlooked by the world. These include the alarming near deindustrialization of many countries and the fickle supply chains unabashedly weaponized into critical global shortages and tools of political coercion by those who control them. As I said, these are major challenges of present and future security that are crying out for solutions, and I haven't even mentioned kinetic conflicts or arms races or cyber wars or the militarization of outer space. They underline the pressing need for comprehensive reform, a fresh global approach, and a new global solidarity. Since we in India still subscribe to our ancient dictum that the world is one family, we have been calling for this reformed multilateralism that will enable a more stable multipolar world order to emerge. Sadly, I'm not optimistic that this will come to pass anytime soon. In the meantime, therefore, we are all reappraising priorities, strategies, relationships, and even strategic geography. We are scrambling to adjust to the rapid flux and the growing uncertainty. Long-standing assumptions are being revisited by India, by Australia, and by many others. We are searching for reliable and resilient partners. Those with shared values and a common vision obviously fit the bill more perfectly. At least some of us can band together, pool our resources, our convening power, and our comparative advantages to face the challenge, try to improve the state of affairs, and make a positive difference. These minilateral or plurilateral approaches are reflective of our times, and such a focused effort is what the Quad countries are attempting. Since this collective effort will directly impinge on the nefarious designs and objectives of some adversaries, it is hardly surprising that they seek to paint the Quad as some sort of military alliance or an Asian NATO. This narrative and scaremongering will continue, perhaps even get shriller, and India, Australia, Japan, and USA will need to counter it constantly, not through a war of words, but through actual demonstration of the Quad's effectiveness as a grouping that brings tangible benefits and better options for our Indo-Pacific partners, enabling them to make sovereign and free choices. We want them to see that we are neither subjecting them to domination nor trapping them in any binary power rivalry. We frame the Quad by what we do together and not by how others may describe us. If, in the process, it worries some that it is really a counterbalancing force, then so be it, and I see no harm in any perceived deterrent value. Some of the economic challenges I have alluded to, particularly the concentration risk in international trade, means that building diversified, resilient, and trusted supply chains is a priority for Indo-Pacific nations. It is also a key area of focus in international relations today. In this endeavor too, besides our bilateral efforts, India and Australia have teamed up with Japan, and we have launched our Trilateral Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. Another challenge, an acute one for us in the Indo-Pacific, and one which Australia is especially facing a lot of, is in the digital domain. Digital technology and cybersecurity will undoubtedly be an important determinant of our sovereignty, safety, and competitiveness in this century. I'm happy that India and Australia have advanced tools and capabilities, a high level of complementarity and trust, and convergent views on evolving data standards and global norms. India is already an IT giant and a leader in creating public digital infrastructure. It offers scale and sophistication that can create productive partnerships for next generation digital and telecom capabilities and standards. Our mutual trust opens up vast opportunities for cooperation in cybersecurity, and together we can also extend India's transformative use of digital infrastructure to change the lives of people and support inclusive development elsewhere, especially in the Indo-Pacific region and the small island developing states. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, Australia is a country that has grown exponentially in importance for India in recent years, and I dare say India too is a priority country for Australia now. Considering that, till about 15 years ago, we considered each other to be somewhat distant and rather aloof, with even a fairly frigid period following our 1998 nuclear weapons tests. The transformation of our relations today has been nothing short of remarkable. There are good reasons for this reappraisal and fresh discovery by either country of the value in the other, and of the win-win proposition for both through closer collaboration and greater interdependence. This realization has translated into working together in new and multiple domains, from traditional security to contemporary challenges to futuristic technologies. In turn, though these closer and more frequent interactions have led to a virtuous cycle of greater trust, candid conversations, understanding, and goodwill. The higher comfort level has allowed the carving of new, even path-breaking agreements between us. As I said, there are several reasons that have brought India and Australia closer together. The rapidly growing Indian diaspora in Australia, close to 1 million today, a big student community, impressive tourist numbers, and solid sporting ties have meant that our people-to-people links are strong, expanding, and serving as living bridges between us. Another factor is economic. Our trade has grown quite rapidly to over 31 billion US dollars per annum. For Australia, India is today its 7th largest trading partner and a major destination for exports of its mineral and metal resources. But trade remains below potential, which is why the new free trade agreement that we were able to negotiate quickly last year and which entered into force on the 29th of December, holds so much promise. In this, India has provided new market access to Australia of a level that we have not granted so far to any other country. Beyond just trade, there is also today a strong shared sense that India and Australia can help each other grow and transform. In Australia, there is the new realization that its future prosperity and security can no longer rely on any single country alone. Similarly, Australian companies simply cannot remain producers and exporters of primary commodities only. They must also diversify into processing, value addition, and manufacturing. This is where Indian companies can enable them to chart new pathways through investment flows and creation of value chains. Likewise, India's economic growth needs another quantum jump. This requires productivity improvements, more innovation, more high technology, more research and development, and better practices in all sectors: agriculture, industry, and services. These are strengths of Australia which India can benefit from, and we are already engaged in several important collaborative activities and projects. Similarly, India needs an assured large-scale supply of critical minerals and rare earths for its vast e-mobility and clean energy programs, and Australia is among the largest producer and exporter of many of these. Thanks to some cutting-edge research, Australia also has impressive innovation and valuable IPR in photovoltaic technologies. We can not only tie up long-term offtake arrangements, but also create enduring value chains by integrating Australian companies with end manufacturers in India of photovoltaic panels and storage batteries. We are also working with Australia on the entire green hydrogen ecosystem. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, let me say that the various political, strategic, and economic pillars of the India-Australia relationship have matured quite rapidly, and bilateral relations have perhaps never been better. Having moved well beyond the 3 C's of curry, Commonwealth, and cricket that defined our somewhat limited ties earlier, it is today a very forward-looking partnership for the future and enjoys firm bipartisan support in both our countries. Thank you for your attention.